Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Friday the 10th of February 2017 and we are at Greg's home shooting the breeze. Greg, good morning to you.
Hi, welcome.
From our last video with you, we mentioned that you have considerable experience in political, economic and world affairs. What we did not mention was that members of the inner sanctum, when it is launched in April, will be able to listen to a number of interviews with you on these and a wider range of topics. We thought it a good idea to shoot the breeze with you as a taster of what our inner sanctum members can expect. So let's kick off with some rapid fire questions and answers covering a wide range of topic areas. Greg, the subject on everyone's minds, especially conspiracy theorists. President Trump, was he elected or appointed?
I have a fundamental problem with the concept of conspiracies. I've met many senior people in banking, in politics, in industry and commerce around the world. Very few of them, do I believe, could organise a party in a brewery without the help of their secretaries. I have a fundamental belief that beyond the concept that every aspect of life can be defined as a conspiracy, there is no great overarching conspiracy. That said, anyone who has ever been in a children's playground will appreciate that there is endless conspiracy in life. I believe he was elected. The means by which he was elected, I find somewhat questionable.
Why questionable, Greg?
We struggle with the concept of democracy, and of recent years we have been happy to invade a number of countries and shoot people because they didn't believe in democracy, which I think is morally questionable. However, what exactly is a democracy? Are we talking of the popular vote of the total? Or are we talking of some contrived system which may work for a country such as electoral colleges? Are we talking of proportional representation? Or are we talking of first past the post? Democracy is a many-flavoured concept.
Yes, but hang fire there, Greg. I'm hopefully sure you're not saying that President Trump's election was illegitimate because the electoral college system exists. The participants in that system for the election of last year were fully aware of how it worked. So surely it was an equal ground from all sides. So hopefully you're not questioning the legitimacy of it, are you?
I'm not questioning the legitimacy because both sides were in a position to lie through their teeth without anybody stopping them.
Right.
As is all too common a practice when electioneering. On the stump, let's face it, nobody is criminally held to account for any dishonesties they may put forward. Just as the mere act of signing an executive order is not a criminal act. If it gets turned down by the judiciary, it is an act which is politically unwise to have carried out without first clearing the issue with the judiciary.
Do you have any particular sort of executive order in mind?
At the moment, let us take the one that is before your courts in America. The appallingly introduced concept of controlling entry to America. By all means control it. You have every right to do that. But don't just dream up a set of terms and leave people crashing to earth who are flying in aeroplanes based on the terms you offered them.
Yes, but surely the defenders of President Trump would say, well, isn't it better he does something rather than nothing? He's identified immigration from certain countries to be a problem. Is it not better that he actually signs a document and engenders some form of action?
It is well established that a person with the surname Dharma or the surname Bundy has been a mass murderer. Does that mean to say that you automatically ban all people whose surname is Dharma or Bundy? I think that President Trump was appallingly advised. What he has done is carry out an election undertaking with, or should I say not with, but in a manner that has brought the entire American society into a fractured condition, taking sides against each other. It's a very long time ago that one side beat the other in the Civil War. It is not a good time to continue those rivalries. So it is a difficult world, it's a highly competitive world, and it is a world of great flux at the moment. To introduce an ill-conceived bill or executive order which may have as its grounding very sound principles. Firstly, let us establish those sound principles.
Right. So it's the haste that you're more concerned about rather than perhaps taking a little bit of time to assess exactly with evidence who should be banned, how that ban should take place, and then how can it be put into effect. Is that sort of a fair summary of what you're saying?
Yeah, and basically that is what I'm driving at, because to plunge in boots and all without considering the consequences is crassly amateur.
Okay. Another sort of controversial issue is the relationship initially between, or perceived relationship between President Trump and President Putin of Russia. How do you see those relationships develop, not so much necessarily in the individual personal terms, but nation against nation or nation with nation? How do you see that panning out?
I think if it is left to the knee-jerk reactions that are going on at the moment, I see it panning out catastrophically. I'm hoping that in the very near future, wiser heads will prevail and rather more intellectual approach to the problems rather than the bellicose response, because a bellicose response with Russia really isn't very wise, because they have a very large population, they have a very high level of armament, and they have a singular disregard for the casualty rates of their own people.
But only a few days ago, President Trump was interviewed on Fox News, and he was asked by a friend of his, former friend and existing friend of his, representing Fox News, who said, why should we deal with a killer? How can a country deal with a killer? And President Trump said, well, we're not that innocent ourselves. What's your take on that? Because that did upset quite a few commentators who perhaps stated maybe Trump is saying the West is equally as bad as Russia.
I'm pleased to say he's saying America is equally as bad as Russia, because I do not conjoin my country with that statement. Yes, we have, in the very recent past, largely under the influence of America, which I have found dubious, been embroiled in a number of rather foolish forays. For instance, to name but a few, the Arab Spring. It never happened. It was a contrived political event. There is no evidence of
a conspiracy then?
No, not a conspiracy. It was a contrived political event designed for a purpose. The invasion of Libya was crass beyond belief and had nothing to do with the position of Muammar Gaddafi. It had everything to do with the fact that Libya is on the verge, or was on the verge, of introducing the gold dinar.
Right, okay.
The gold dinar had the backing of some of the Gulf states, Libya, Egypt, and other states in the region, and was designed to introduce a standardized currency that would pertain through the Middle East and Africa. And from my side of the pond, I said before it happened that America would not be able to countenance this, as it would be a threat to the stability, such that it is, of the US dollar as a reserve currency of choice in many countries.
So you haven't seen then the invasion of Libya as protecting that currency, because some people would argue that it did. It prevented the gold dinar from being established and therefore allowed America to remain, if you like, the leading economic power of the world.
Yes, but with far more people in that world taking a position where they are looking for ways to move away from America.
Okay, so going back then to Russia and America, how do you see that playing out?
I fear that the relationship will set out to be far closer from the side of America than Russia is ever likely to permit it to be. This will leave America very exposed. Let's look at a specific that also brings in actual facts pertaining to the position of Russia and the inevitability of some of its choices.
Okay.
The Ukraine has been courted by America and very foolishly by the European Union.
Yes.
We can come back on just how foolish and why the European Union went down this road at a later stage.
Right.
The Ukraine was destabilized as far as Russia was concerned. This left them in a position where their relationship with Russia became very strained. Nikita Khrushchev ceded the Crimea to the Ukraine at a time when the Ukraine was effectively wholly owned by Russia, but an integral region of the United Soviet Socialist Republic, the old USSR. now that the Ukraine was veering towards the West, whether wisely or foolishly, is a matter for discussion. This left Crimea in the Ukraine camp.
Mm-hmm.
Firstly, that cannot be countenanced by Russia, because Crimea is the main port and the only hot water port that Russia holds. All others are into the Arctic Sea.
Right.
It is also a major depot for their navy. It is also, and it is an important consideration in a reward-based society, it is one of the great venues for people in the inner circuit for holiday resorts. Many of them have dashas on the Crimean coast. There was no way that Russia was going to see the Crimea move away from being under Russian control.
So what you seem to be saying is that Russia was right, really, to go back into Crimea and defend it against the Ukraine.
I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. What I'm very strongly stressing is it was absolutely inevitable.
Right, right.
You've used that word right again.
Inevitable.
Let us move a little away from Crimea, because I think that is unarguable
Okay.
as a point of view. Not so much a point of view, a point of actual fact. The other big problem that occurs with contention over Ukraine,
Yes.
many people do not seem to understand that during the days of communism in the United Soviet Socialist Republic, there was no religion. Gods were not considered in the communist ideology, be they modern concepts of gods or the age-old concepts of the superstitions of the Bronze Age.
But some people will say, well, there were churches. So...
There were churches, but they were very much controlled, and they were very much outside, or should I say, beyond the pale, if you expected to get anywhere in the Soviet system.
Right.
What people have overlooked is after perestroika, subsequent to the opening up of Russia, by probably one of your most successful presidents, who negotiated with Mikhail Gorbachev and brought down the barriers with Russia in a manner that no modern politician stands much chance of doing again.
But this is the crux of the matter. Ronald Reagan, it is argued, but argued strongly, basically, with Gorbachev, destroyed the USSR.
I would contend that's only part of the truth.
Right. Now, however, Putin wants to rebuild that. He wants to go back to that historical moment as if it never happened. And surely there is a strong, at least academic, if not practical argument that says the last thing the people of the United States should do is form a bond with Putin, whose sole aim is to regain the glory of that great USSR empire.
I think that's in many ways a very valid point, but to cover perestroika, secondly, and to complete the argument on the Ukraine firstly. What people have overlooked is that with the fall of old-style communism
Yes.
that appeared on the surface with Gorbachev, Putin's later behaviour notwithstanding, there was a burgeoning of religions across Russia, the whole of the old Soviet. Islam is stronger in the stans, Turkmenistan, etc. Those countries that are across the Taklamakan Desert from Iraq and Iran. Christianity, in its various forms, also burgeoned. And primacy in the field of Christianity fell to the Russian Orthodox Church. Just as politicians can preach and prattle all they like in a Muslim country, but if the mullahs at Friday prayer tell everyone to ignore their words and do something completely different, the politicians are without a voice. Therefore, Mr. Putin must maintain control of the Ukraine, because thereby he controls the Russian Orthodox Church, the head office, centre, whatever you want to call it, being in Kiev.
Right.
If he loses control of Kiev, he loses control of the Russian Orthodox Church.
And he really sees that as such a great threat.
I believe it is a great threat because people's belief in gods has lasted over 70 years since the communist revolution made them effectively illegal.
So coming back then to this potential special relationship between America and Russia, if I've sort of read your comments correctly or interpreted them correctly, what you're saying is that America could quite naively go into such a relationship with good intent, but actually will be deceived and conned, for the better expression, by Putin, as some would argue he has successfully done with Obama and with George Bush before him, both of whom thought that they could deal with Russia. Are you basically saying you cannot deal with Russia?
I don't think you can deal in the terms that America deals recently with Russia. I think they judge Russia by American standards. And the values in Russia and its leadership bear no resemblance to the standards required in a democratic America.
So should sanctions be withdrawn and trade develop, or should they be kept in place, if not enhanced even further?
I believe sanctions should remain in place until the reasons for those sanctions ends. Otherwise, what is the point in threatening anyone with sanctions if you don't carry it out?
But you've already admitted that there is no way Putin is going to come out of that intrinsically important strategic part of the Ukraine. Therefore, sanctions are there to stay forever.
No, sanctions don't have to be there to stay and can be eradicated fairly quickly. But I question whether the present authorities in the US are capable of it. The problem being that they lack diplomatic training And one of the big problems America has had for at least since the Second World War is an inability to judge countries outside of measuring them against America. America has always had an introspective appearance to its diplomatic service. Its diplomatic service tends to be people appointed to it, not people who have worked up through it and learnt it.
So in one respect, you're saying the typical sort of British model of the civil service, where people spend years honing their skills, developing those skills, is probably the better method rather than perhaps appointees that tend to be the case in the United States. Because we have witnessed whenever you change a presidency, you basically change all of the civil servants, certainly at the White House, that support that president. Is this where you're going with this argument?
I think that there is a tendency in America to have professional politicians and amateur diplomats,
right?
When in reality, amateur politicians and professional diplomats serve a country better. You mentioned the British model of civil servants. You mention it at a very strange time if you stop and think about it. Never in our history, in the last 300-400 years, has Britain been so bereft of professional civil servants. The reason being that we have very, very foolishly, and it is something I cautioned against back in the 60s, we have permitted the énarques of France, those who went to the École Nationale, known as énarques, to become the civil service of the European Union. Anyone wishing to have a civil service career of any level for the last 40-odd years has sought his career in the European Union. Net result, now that we are, in my opinion, and I stress it is only my opinion and only the opinion of the majority of people in Britain, there is a vociferous minority, we are doing the right thing in leaving the European Union, but it will give us difficulties in the fields of diplomacy for several years to come as we train the diplomats we let leave to join the European system.
That is the end of video 1. In video 2, we continue this discussion and we cover the issue of Brexit and its implications for both the UK and the world economies. And by the way, the sort of squeaking sound that you hear in the background are some birds that Greg owns and keeps at his home. And as they are in the process of laying eggs currently, they are rather talkative. We hope you enjoy video 2. We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumb up and share it on Twitter. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe as a free member for regular email updates and offers. Our Facebook page, which is updated daily, can be found at facebook.com/illuminatisilver. Disclaimer. Illuminati silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its own.